Good morning. My name is Makau Mutua, and I'm the Dean of SUNY Buffalo Law School, the state's law school. Please put your hands together to join me in welcoming to Buffalo Law the Governor of the great state of New York, the Empire State, Governor Andrew Cuomo. Governor, you promised me you'll be back, and you are back. Thank you very much for coming back to the law school. I would like to recognize a few officials in the audience. Dr. Satish Tripathi, the president of UB, and the co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council, Mr. Howard Zemsky, the Regional Economic Development Council co-chair, Mr. John Comel, New York State Power Authority chairman, and recently named president of the Harbor Center, Mr. Paul Deister, the mayor of Niagara Falls, Jack Quinn, the president of the Erie Community College, Ms. Betty Jean Grant, the chairperson of Erie County Legislature, Mr. Mark Schroeder, the City of Buffalo Comptroller, Mr. Anthony Coriana, the town of Tonawanda supervisor, and Mrs. Sheila Megan, the town of West Seneca supervisor. Thank you, Governor, for coming to the law school again to discuss this important initiative, the Public Trust Act. Early in his term, Governor Cuomo made great progress towards restoring public trust back into our government. But as we all have seen, recent events remind us that maintaining the integrity of our government is something that we all have an interest in, regardless of our political beliefs. I know that our students today at UB will go on to become great leaders, and it is important that all of us, whether we are elected or appointed officials or just common citizens, set a great example for true public service. The governor's proposals today represent an important step forward for the people of this state. Governor Cuomo has put forth multiple bills that will address the influence of money in politics and ensure that the interests of the people of this great state are truly represented. For us in the law school here, we take great pride in what the governor has done because we've been committed to producing socially conscious lawyers. The proposed reforms include voter registration, which we believe that will open up our electoral process, making it more inclusive, and particularly for our youngest adults. A public sector with integrity is something that is essential for our democracy, and something that we all must continue to strive for. So I want all of us to join the governor today in pushing to bring back pride, the pride of the public in our public service. It is now my pleasure to welcome Mr. Jeremy Quillen, the Special Counsel of the Governor for Public Integrity and Ethics Reform. Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Dean Mutua. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I wanted to just spend a little time going over some of the proposals that are contained in the reform package that the governor announced yesterday and today. Today, this package continues the work that the governor has done to fight corruption in Albany. Much has already been accomplished. Ethics reform in 2011, unprecedented lobbying disclosures among legislators of clients, and many other important reforms. But in Albany, the work of reform must continue to build upon these accomplishments, and today, the governor provides the next chapter in the reform agenda. Now, see if I can get this working. There you go. We've all seen the recent headlines, and unfortunately New Yorkers have been reminded repeatedly this year that corruption remains a problem, as indictments have been handed down in numerous cases involving abuse of the public's trust and misuse of the sacred authority that is granted to public officials. This three-part agenda announced today begins with the Public Trust Act, an act that was introduced in the legislature earlier this session. And I'm going to provide just a few highlights of that act. First, under current law, district attorneys have an unduly heavy burden of proof to prove bribery by public officials, far more burdensome than under federal law. The Public Trust Act would conform New York state law to federal law, and instead of requiring proof of an actual agreement or understanding between the person offering a bribe and the public official, the DA would only have to prove the intent upon the offerer to influence the public official through the bribe, and this would help facilitate the prosecution of bribery substantially. Next, under existing law, only public officials and not the private individuals who conspire with them can be convicted under the existing crime of defrauding the government. Under this new crime, corrupting the government, the private individuals would be subject to prosecution as well and could face up to 25-year sentences and a lifetime ban from doing business with the state in various forms. And finally, there was a new crime for any public official who fails to report bribery. We can't fight corruption without changing the culture, and that requires enlisting everyone as part of the solution. And the Public Trust Act would do that. In addition, any official convicted of any of these public corruption crimes would be banned for life, not only from doing business with the state, receiving state contracts, but also from holding elected office, registering as a lobbyist, or being, for example, a Medicaid provider. In addition, under current law, DAs can seek restitution that requires only that the official pay back the amount that he or she gained from the improper conduct. That is not much of a disincentive for public corruption if all you lose is the amount that you gain from the corruption. The Public Trust Act would allow DAs to ask courts to require a defendant to pay as much as 3 times the amount of the illegal gain. Next, election reform, a critical part of this package. One of the best ways, as we all know, to ensure that our elected officials are accountable to the public and do not feel that they are immune from public scrutiny for their conduct or for their misconduct is to make sure that voters are engaged and they're voting. The governor's reform package would do just that. First, the current State Board of Elections, as you probably know, has many problems. One of the major ones is the enforcement. Enforcement is limited and impeded by partisan gridlock. Under this plan, there would be a new independent chief enforcement counsel at the State Board of Elections to investigate violations, prosecute offenders, and impose penalties. As you may know, New York routinely ranks at the bottom in terms of voter registration and voter turnout. To address that, the governor's package has a number of proposals, one of which is to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote at their high schools, driving schools, or other locations, and then once they reach the age of 18, the Board of Elections would verify that information and they would automatically be registered. This, we believe, would improve registration rates, especially among young voters, dramatically. In addition, the governor's bill would remove the clutter and other aspects of our ballots so that the font size can be larger and everyone can read the ballot without a magnifying glass. It would also move the deadline for voter registration from 25 days before an election to 10 days before an election. Just when people get excited about an election, currently they're not able to register to vote. That would change under this bill. In addition, currently voters and candidates who wish to change their party enrollment must wait until after the next election for that change to take effect. Again, just when they're excited about an election and want to get involved, they're unable to because it doesn't take effect until after the election. That would change under this package. Finally, campaign finance reform. If passed, this package of reforms submitted to the legislature yesterday would change New York from a laggard to a leader in fighting both the appearance and the reality of corruption. The problems, as you know, are many. For most offices, New York State's contribution limits are substantially higher than any other state that imposes such limits, and so high as to ensure that large donors dominate major political campaigns and candidates spend as much time raising money or more time rather than talking with voters about the issues. contribution limits also feature numerous loopholes. Small donors play a far less significant role than large donors, and shadow groups can now spend millions on advertisements without full disclosure of their sources of funding or their expenditures. Under this bill, full disclosure would be required for any ad that advocates for the election or defeat of a candidate. All candidates and parties and these shadow groups would be required to disclose contributions within 48 hours of receipt at any time. There would be lower contributions for all state offices, to the party's housekeeping accounts, and also party committees, and contributions from corporations would be further limited. Finally, in terms of loopholes, the LLC loophole, which allows LLCs to be treated as individuals and thus subject to the very high contribution limits, would be instead treated as corporations and limited substantially in their contributions. Further, this bill would put in place a public financing system modeled on the New York City system, where contributions would be matched at a 6-to-1 rate up to $175. There'd be strict limits on the amount of public financing that a candidate could receive to protect the taxpayers. And this system would bring more talent into competition for offices and empower small donors to make a big difference in elections. Finally, the bill tightens up and clarifies the restrictions on the personal use of campaign funds, so they could only be used for expenses directly related to either the campaign or to public office. It's an understatement to say these reforms are sorely needed, and they're needed now. Thank you very much. Before I go, let me introduce our next speaker, Diana Chihawk, who's been a leader in developing in training women to be leaders in our community and in government. She's also a member of the New York Lead Coalition, which has been across the state pushing for campaign finance reform, and we welcome her here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy, and welcome, Governor, to Buffalo, to our beautiful city. We're glad to have you here again. First and foremost, I want to applaud the governor for his leadership and commitment to restoring the trust of the New York citizens in our government. This is vital at this moment. Under his leadership, we have made much progress, but it is incredibly clear that we have a ways to go. So the governor has recognized that for government to be effective, citizens need to trust in the government. That is why we need campaign finance reform now. Right now, many New Yorkers think that campaigns are financed by major donors and corporations, and their voice and contributions are silenced. As a result, New York has the smallest percentage of the total population contributing to political campaigns. That's significant. To give the average New Yorker a real voice in elections and promote our democracy, the governor has proposed to establish a public financing system. This public financing system is of particular interest to me because it will increase ballot access to women and minority candidates who truly want to make change within their community, who want to be true public servants. The system will be based on the successful 25-year model that is currently in place in New York City. To protect taxpayers, there would be limits imposed on public financing, and there would be a new unit to oversee the system at the State Board of Elections. Additionally, loopholes in the public housekeeping accounts will be closed and limitations on individual contributions lowered. These reforms are necessary and will bring change to an election system that is clearly unfair and not working for the average New Yorker. New York elections are not for sale to the highest bidder, and the governor's proposals will ensure that elections and campaigns in New York are honest and fair and accessible to everyone. These changes have been long overdue, and I urge our state legislatures to have the courage to move this bill forward in this session. So thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce our wonderful Erie County District Attorney, Mr. Frank Sadita.
Boy, I remember this room when I was in my 20s. Wow. Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Governor, for inviting me to speak today. It was an honor being your colleague when you were the Attorney General, You'd always tell the governor and I apart because I was the tall Italian-looking guy in the blue suit. And of course, it's an honor today for you to have me here to say a few words about your efforts to ensure integrity and to ensure accountability on behalf of public officials. You know, I believe that most public officials are earnest and we're hardworking and we have the best interests of our constituents in mind. Unfortunately, the unethical and sometimes unlawful conduct of politicians and their cronies taints the reputation of honest public servants and, even worse, undermines public confidence, the confidence in all the people here today in our government. The latest headlines from Albany have sparked a renewed call for maintaining the highest standards in state government. And fortunately, Governor Cuomo has answered that call. The Public Trust Act that he has proposed in April is surely an important step in combating public corruption and in restoring integrity to our government. As the district attorney for Erie County and as this community's chief law enforcement official, I know the importance of using every resource in order to secure a conviction in the pursuit of justice. When it comes to rooting out public corruption, however,